Sure. Hello, welcome. I'm Joshua Perkins with Compression Care, welcoming you to our seventh Spotlight educational series of 2025. You can always check out the schedule for future uh, educational spotlights at compressioncare.com. However, August is going to be, we'll have one, and then in September, we're having a special series educating on a new program we are launching. So keep tuned for that. Look at that. I will send out emails regarding everything we're going to be talking about and the different schedule. But just wanted to let you know that September is going to be kind of uh, a special month for some new announcements. And before we get into Carmen's presentation, I want to tell you a little bit about Compression Care and our sister company, Pretty in Pink Boutique, which is based in Nashville, Tennessee. We have been in the business of helping patients with their compression needs and billing for garments for almost 20 years. Uh, Compression Care is the national vision of the owner and founder, Pamela Ludwig. Pam started PIPB and Compression Care with the goal of helping patients get the care they need while never paying more than they have to. At Compression Care, we strive to improve patients' lives by making high quality care accessible, affordable, and convenient no matter where they live. So, as an exciting new development with Compression Care, in order to meet our goal of helping patients never pay more for their garment than they have to, we have recently purchased CompressionGuru.com. And this will allow us to give your patients the best insurance price. And if their deductible is higher than the cash price, or they simply do not have insurance coverage, we'll now be able to offer the compression garments at the minimum advertised price. You'll hear that as MAP a lot. So we're working on the integrations that will make this process seamless for you and your patients. And I'll send out more communication on that. And we'll have all the education coming out in September about that as well. So keep tuned, keep in touch with us for all of that. It's going to be a lot of fun. So all new referrals and questions can be emailed to referrals@compressioncare.com or fax to us at 615-807-3334. And if you have any questions for Carmen or for Pam, who is on this meeting today, you can just post them in the chat and we'll make sure that at the end we have time to get you some answers. So just a little bit more about Pam. Pam, owner and founder of PIB and Compression Care, is also the head of our billing department. So if you have questions about Carmen's presentation or any kind of billing questions, now's the time to get them answered by two great people in this industry. So I want to get in a little bit about Carmen, and most of you probably know Carmen Anderson. Carmen is a speech language pathologist by trade, but has shifted her career into the durable medical equipment advocacy space. She is engaged with insurance companies nationwide to provide education and facilitate product chain coverage, affect positive changes in medical policies, and secure new contracts. Since 2023, Carmen has partnered with the U.S. Medical Compression Alliance, the USMCA, to support the implementation of the Lymphedema Treatment Act. This effort involved advocating with the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services and their contractors to promote the lymphedema compression products. So I will be quiet, and with no further ado, please welcome Carmen Anderson and Pamela Ludwig.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Pam. I appreciate the introduction. So what we're going to cover today is the Lymphedema Treatment Act, what we know, what we've learned so far, and what we're going to see moving forward. We'll do a quick recap of what became covered or eligible for coverage during the Lymphedema Treatment Act. We'll also talk a little bit about timelines for distributing products and refills or replacements, what that looks like. We'll dig into the day-to-day impact that it has on patients, clinicians, and suppliers. And then we'll also talk a little bit about the future and what we anticipate coming, and we can go through some Q&A as well. I believe, as Joshua mentioned, you can type questions into the chat, and Pam will try to answer those, and we can kind of engage in those as we go. Just a quick disclaimer, this information is really for educational purposes only. If you have true questions about clinical diagnoses or billing, to contact a specific expert to help you for that. So we will jump into an LTA recap. So what started all of this? The Lymphedema Treatment Act was initiated by an advocacy group or a grassroots patient group called the Lymphedema Advocacy Group, or LAG. Heather Ferguson is the founder of that group, and she has put in tremendous effort to make change. The problem started with that compression garments were not historically covered by Medicare. And it was really because of a technicality in regulatory language. They didn't meet the traditional definition of DME or durable medical equipment. And CMS was not able to change that on their own. Only Congress had the power to change the definition or to add a new benefit category. So it took LAG over 12 years of lobbying Congress to get the law passed. And it finally happened at the end of December in 2022. And they gave 1 year to prepare for that coverage to go into effect. And so coverage went into effect on January 1st of 2024. There you go. So you heard Josh mention the U.S. Medical Compression Alliance. Let's talk a little bit about what their role is and what they've done. So after the law passed at the end of 2022, we had 1 year to prepare. The LAG, many other clinical groups, advocacy groups, industry members were trying to figure out how do we prepare for coverage and what do we need to do. So in 2023, different groups, different stakeholders came together. They started meeting with CMS. We tried to get together and figure out how to have a united voice. We also took a look at the current HCPCS codes, and then we submitted applications for additional HCPCS codes. And then when Medicare released their proposed rule, we submitted comments and feedback to try to provide additional insight. In 2024, after coverage went live, we did in-person education. We did virtual education as well. We really wanted the people behind the desks to have the opportunity to touch and feel and truly understand the products that were now going to be covered or eligible for coverage by insurance. So we did a number of different engagement sessions to help them understand what the products are and what they do for patients. We also were not quite happy with how many HCPCS codes we got right off the bat, so we continued to submit additional requests for more HCPCS codes. In 2024, we were successful in getting 12 new and adjusted HCPCS codes. So when the original publication came out, for example, there were not custom adjustable wrap codes. They had only published off-the-shelf adjustable wrap codes. So in 2024, that was a big win because we got new custom wrap codes added to that list of HCPCS codes. Now that we're already halfway through 2025, the work is not done yet. We're going to continue to engage in education. We are also starting to look at the private payers like the UHCs, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Aetna, etc., trying to identify the discrepancies between what Medicare has approved for coverage as opposed to what the private payers are doing. And then we're also digging into some of the data to figure out what's happening with claims that are being submitted, what's also happening with pricing, how can we advocate for that, and then just continuing to engage in conversation with CMS and other contractors. And a quick shout out for the USMCA, the different members. So there's JOPES, JUZO, MEDI, LNR, SIGBARIS, and TUAN. Those are the key members for the USMCA. So focusing in on the LTA, as I mentioned, coverage went into effect on January 1st of 2024. There is not a medical policy, so there's not a local coverage determination or a national coverage determination or a medical policy for Medicare patients specifically. So as of today, when claims are submitted for Medicare patients, coverage decisions are being made on an individual claim by claim basis. Our understanding is that there is not an impending LCD, that it's not going to happen right now, but there's always potential for one in the future. So we'll continue to engage in conversation and advocate as appropriate in that scenario. So right now, the barrier to entry for the Lymphedema Treatment Act is that individuals have to have a diagnosis of lymphedema. It doesn't include other illnesses, and they limit it to these 4 ICD-10 codes that you see on the screens. So this is essentially the first step or the first part of requirements for the LTA. You have to have one of these 4 diagnosis codes in order to be eligible for coverage. So there's I-89.0, Q-82.0, I-97.2, and I-97.89. One of the important things that we talked about preparing for implementation is that we didn't want to limit it to things like post-mastectomy lymphedema. That's a huge and very important thing, but we were really trying to educate that the diagnosis in and of itself is the important part. And not every patient that has breast cancer has had a mastectomy. So we want to make sure that patients that have lymphedema have access. So that's the point of these 4 ICD-10 codes, is to try to open it up to a diagnosis of lymphedema regardless of etiology. So then we'll talk a little bit about frequency limitations. So quantities and frequencies. Medicare identified that both custom and standard products are eligible for coverage. From a daytime perspective, they called out 3 units per affected body part, eligible for replacement every 6 months. On the nighttime side of things, they identified 2 units per affected body part, eligible for replacement every 2 years. When we were going through this proposed rule and some of the initial regulatory language, they were only going to do 2 units for daytime. And we really advocated for 3. And the reason behind that is because that burden on patients to do laundry that frequently is really fair to the patients. So none of us are doing laundry every day to wear the same pair of undergarments every day. So we wanted patients to have one to wash, one to wear, and one to dry. This should also help prevent infection and make sure that they're able to keep up with the demands of their symptoms. So we were really pleased to see that quantity for daytime increased to 3. So 3 units per affected body part for daytime. Nighttime, we advocated for the same. Unfortunately, CMS only granted that 2, and then they also extended that timeline to 2 years. So we wish that was shorter, but as of right now, it's 2 units per affected body part every 2 years. How this impacts you kind of on that day-to-day basis is we want to make sure that patients are able to access all 3 of those at one time. We know from an ordering perspective, there might be some variation. If you order one custom, and then once you confirm that that custom product fits, then you order 2 additional. But the intent is really to provide those 3 up front. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into some other details. But from an accessories perspective, it's important to note there's not a frequency or quantity limitation on those. It's based on clinical need. So it will be dependent on the medical record documentation to justify how many and when they need replacing. And same goes for bandages. Actually, it's based on clinical need, and CMS has called out that they're eligible for coverage during both the maintenance phase and the decongestive phase. So we'll dig in on distributing products and timelines and what that looks like. From a Medicare distribution perspective, it's important to call out that they don't all have to be delivered or dispensed on the same date of service. So like I was mentioning from a custom versus standard perspective, you may want to do that first custom product and then order 2 additional customs for that patient. From a standard perspective, I would think it would be more appropriate to order those off the shelf products, all three at the same time. So the patient has immediate access and can start that wash, wear, and dry cycle for products. Suppliers can ship them, but they are still responsible for taking those measurements, doing the fitting service, making sure patients understand how to don and doff, how to take care of the item, and adjustments as well. So from the USMCA, we had some conversation with the DME Max because there was some differences in the timelines and how that would reset that clock essentially. So if a patient got their first product all at one day and then 6 months goes by, what does that look like? So this example scenarios is meant to walk through typical distribution scenarios. So in my mind, example A across that top row would be an example of a patient who's receiving custom products. So they receive their first custom product in January, and then they will receive their 2 additional custom products in March. So that's their daytime allotment of 3. They are then eligible for another set or their refill set essentially in July. They're eligible for 3 additional garments. The scenario scenario B, I think is more typical of a standard off the shelf perspective. That patient receives all 3 of their products in January, and then they are eligible for refill of those 3 products in July. Scenario C, I think, should be an outlier or not happen very often. That would be when patients get 1 product in January, a second product in March, and a third product in May. They are then eligible for that refill again in July. What's important to call out is there's no rollover. So say a patient only gets 1 or 2 products, they don't utilize their full 3 allotment. They don't get to use 2 January through July and then they get 4 for July through December. That's not how it works. It's 3 units per 6 months. And so I would encourage you to utilize those 3 in that 6-month window. So you hear me talk about refill, replacement, what that looks like. So if a patient has their original set and then there's no changes when it's time for after that 6-month window has elapsed, they do not need a new prescription unless something has changed. So if they're ordering the exact same products, the exact same garments, you don't need to get a new prescription. But if they go from 3 flat knit, for example, to 2 flat knit and adjustable wrap, then a new prescription would be required. You have to make sure that the medical record documentation continues to support that the products are reasonable and necessary. And Medicare also calls out that timely documentation is necessary. So that timely word means that the documentation must occur in the preceding 12 months. Something that's important to note is that a patient may be in therapy and then they discharge from therapy. They're not going back. We need to educate patients and help them understand that when they go into their primary care physician, just to advocate for themselves so that their primary care physician can carry on that timely documentation, because it's usually not feasible for patients to go back into therapy just to get ongoing documentation for that. So helping educate those patients up front that they'll need to advocate for themselves for maintenance documentation. The suppliers, they'll also contact the beneficiaries prior to dispensing that refill, and then they have to maintain proof of delivery for that as well. From a replacement perspective, we know that things happen. Sometimes patients will lose a garment, it gets stolen, or it gets irreparably damaged. The suppliers are able to submit for a replacement for those. So say, for example, a patient loses 1 product, they are actually eligible for replacement of all 3. So their quantity could be replaced all at once. When you do that, it does reset that frequency limitation clock. So regardless of when the other ones were dispensed, if you file for a replacement, it restarts that 6-month window. And something to call out is that that quantity number is not unique to each supplier. So if a patient got products from one supplier, they can't then 1 month later go to a different supplier and get 3 more products. So there is a little bit of a burden on the supplier and the patients and the clinicians to make sure that there's not crossover or duplicating. It's working with one supplier and then just staying within that 6 month window. After the 6 month window has expired, if you need to change suppliers, you could, but that's just something to keep in mind. So that total quantity and frequency does not change by supplier. It's just solely based on that 6 month time window. And of course, documentation to support what has happened to the product, why it was lost or damaged, what happened, that will help protect payment for that replacement as well. So I talked a lot about Medicare so far. What about other payers? Each payer will follow their own process. Many of them may have a different medical policy, different quantities, different replacement timelines. So we do have to check a patient-specific eligibility based on their plan type to determine the available benefits for that patient. As I mentioned earlier, we are starting to evaluate the different private payers to see what the discrepancies are, because some of the private payer plans are pretty different in terms of what they're able to cover or willing to cover. And that's more so for those commercial plans. In theory, if a patient has a Medicare Advantage plan, they should be eligible for at least what Medicare covers. But anyone that has worked with insurance knows that that can be a little bit of a challenging pathway. So just be aware that other payers kind of work at their own pace and with their own process. But we are continuing to advocate for coverage that mirrors Medicare with those other payers as well. So let's talk about some of the day-to-day impact for patients, clinicians, and suppliers. So I mentioned you'll have to check that individual insurance eligibility, so determine what type of plan that they have to see what they might be eligible for coverage, and then they'll have to visit with the clinician. So there typically has to be a face-to-face encounter at some point to gather that patient information, to get their history, document their symptoms. And that documentation, since there is not a medical policy, is really what is going to drive and support medical necessity at this point. We're relying on clinician judgment to advocate for the specific products that that patient needs to manage their symptoms. That's also where we'll talk about product selection and fitting, partnering with the suppliers, and then we also have to figure out how to navigate denials as well. From the compression care side of things, I know that they have a wonderful referral cover sheet that you can use to set up that order. Pam, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about that since you may be more familiar with it.
Yeah, this is just our standard referral cover sheet that you can send in an email or you can send it via fax. This just helps us get a quick overview of what you're sending. So if you simply just want a benefits verification, you can just indicate that here. Or what a lot of therapists do is write right there on the garment specifications, go ahead and write out what they're wanting to order and then include behind that the plan of care, the notes, everything we need in order to actually be able to file that claim to Medicare. But at least right there at the front page, we're seeing exactly what you need to order. So we do make it as simple as possible for you. And then it lists all the documents that we do need in order to file a claim.
Great, thank you. So when you're thinking about that documentation, as I mentioned earlier, the barrier to entry is that ICD-10 code. So within your daily visit notes or your medical record documentation, you want to make sure that that ICD-10 is captured, whether it's by the clinician. I think the referring physician would also have to support that as well. Talking about the symptoms per affected area. So you heard me say it's 3 units per affected area. If you want a patient to have coverage for their legs and then also have coverage for their trunk or abdomen area or genital area, you'll need to specifically document that the lymphedema is affecting those anatomical areas to justify getting a product onto those areas. You'll want to speak to the duration. Has this patient had this for 6 months, 1 year, 5 years? Talking about the severity or the staging. I do encourage people when you're documenting in your notes to specify which type of staging you're using. It's pretty common in clinical practice to use ISL stages 0 through 3, but just throwing in a quick label of ISL stage 2, whatever is appropriate for that patient. But putting that in there is important. From a prognosis perspective, speaking to what different things impact the patient for how they're able to manage their symptoms. We know that lymphedema is chronic, it's not curable. So let's talk about how the patient's going to manage this long term and what that includes for them. The justifications that you'll need to think of is, does this patient only need nighttime, or are they having overnight refill? And so they should also have nighttime products. So calling out both types of products is important. Specifying whether they need off the shelf or custom. If they need custom, calling out what symptoms or clinical presentations justify that custom product. If they need any accessories like donning or doffing devices. And then if they need single or mixed product types. So we know that there's many products on the market, but calling out if they need circular knit, flat knit, and there is also, you are able to mix those. So say you want a patient to have 2 flat knit, but then you also want them to have an adjustable wrap because they're going to visit their grandkids and they have more fluid fluctuations on those days when they're more mobile or traveling. You want them to have some wrap options as well. So if you have that, just call it out. Why does the patient need it? And then, as I mentioned earlier, bandaging supplies and accessories don't have a specific quantity limit. So just calling out what the patient needs so that that can get covered as well. And it's important to tell that patient story. So as I mentioned, are they independent? Do they rely on a caregiver? What does that look like? What's their mobility and dexterity? Anyone that's ever put on a compression garment knows that it's not necessarily the easiest thing in the world. There are tools that can help with that, but calling out that they may need a different type for different reasons. So if they have impaired dexterity or mobility, are they better off with a wrap because it's easier to don and doff for them? So just calling out those pieces that impact that. Skin condition, do they need a liner or some sort of different zone to help manage their skin condition or ulcers or sensitive areas? Or if they need increased compression in a specific spot because they have fibrosis. So calling out those different clinical pieces that could impact the effectiveness of compression and how you want that managed. And then also activities of daily living, like I said, if they're going to visit grandkids or if there's different activities that they're doing and their overnight needs as well. There is a specific Medicare documentation checklist. It calls out the things that they're looking for. This is really more specific to the suppliers, something that they reference when they're getting ready to submit a claim, but of course also beneficial for clinicians or anyone that's interacting with patients. They're looking for that prescription, permission from the Medicare beneficiary, that proof of delivery, documentation that supports the need, the diagnosis, and then again, justification for custom or different quantities and frequencies as well. And there's a QR code on the screen there that you can scan, and it'll take you directly to the Medicare page for that documentation checklist. When we talk about submitting a claim specifically to the DME Max, one of the acronyms you might have heard thrown around was PDAC quite a bit. And so PDAC stands for the Pricing, Data Analysis, and Coding Contractor. And what PDAC does is manufacturers can submit their products to PDAC to specifically assign that product to a HCPCS code. At this time, that's not required for lymphedema compression garments. It's a voluntary process. So the manufacturers do not have to submit that, and suppliers are not required to have that PDAC verification letter in hand prior to billing a claim. But the products do have to reasonably align with that HCPCS code. So the verification letter can be nice because it provides, a layer of confidence that this product fits in this code. So it's a nice to have, but I do want to call out, it's not a requirement. The other piece we touched on a little bit already was that there's not an NCD or an LCD. So there's no specific medical policy from the Medicare perspective. And so coverage and really that overall claim payment will at the end of the day be based on medical necessity documentation. So we fully recognize that this is a change and an increased burden on therapists. Prior to the Lymphedema Treatment Act, compression garments were typically cash pay products. There was some private pay coverage, but we really recognize that this shift in insurance coverage, of course, then adds to medical record documentation. But also important to note, that's not different really than for any DME equipment, for any testing that we want done. If we go into the doctor and we need an x-ray, their note has to support the logic for it. So we appreciate the extra effort that clinicians are putting in partnership to help get patients what they need. So a big thank you to the clinicians that are putting in the extra time for documentation. In the meantime, Medicare, PDAC, the DME Max, they are putting out different articles. They'll call it a billing and coding article or guidance document that really help drive some of those decisions in the absence of a medical policy. So those are all published on their websites as well. We know that for the most part on the Medicare side, it sounds like things have been going smoothly, but we're running into some issues really on the private payer side. We really want to hear about those from you all. Your voice really makes a difference. And as we're trying to identify gaps or discrepancies in coverage, we need to be able to go to those payers with real world examples. So on the screen here, you'll see this QR code on the right-hand side. You can scan that and it will take you directly to the Lymphedema Advocacy Group and their denial reporting form. So if you have a patient and you've prescribed them a product and they're not able to get it, if insurance is denying coverage, we want to hear about that because we're trying to engage with these payers and meet with them and have conversations about some of the challenges. But I am big on facts, not feelings. And so if we can go to the payers with a specific example from their health plan of where they have denied a patient coverage, it makes a difference. So we are really eager to hear feedback from you about denials so we can advocate on your behalf to try to make a change with a specific payer. So if you're having trouble getting access or coverage for patients, please report it through the LAG's denial reporting form.
So Carmen, can I ask a question on that? Go back
of
to the reporting form. So I know I've filled that out several times. The reporting form is really definitely geared more towards what I would call a denial. And so if you saw one of the questions in the chat, someone was posting a question about she's having trouble getting anyone to cover bandages. And then I said, yes, the reason why a lot of vendors don't cover bandages is because the reimbursement is so low. So that's not technically a denial because we know if we were to submit a claim to Medicare for bandages, it's going to be covered. The problem is that vendors aren't getting reimbursed enough to be able to provide that item to that patient. So I think what I want to make sure is, can the clinicians out there use this denial reporting form to report lack of access to care, not simply a denial, but hey, I can't get this covered anywhere. Is there room on the form for them to indicate that?
I don't have the form memorized exactly, but I think there are free fill boxes and they should be able to put in a narrative description of the challenge, and that matters too. And so there's different groups that are advocating and individually and also partnering together for different topics. I would say that pricing or fee schedules kind of goes across a number of different groups because it's so complicated.
And the more we kind of shout that out, I think the better it helps everyone. So I think it's important to document when you're not able to get coverage from a vendor or any vendor due to price. That matters.
Yes, if pricing is an issue, that's something we need to hear about because it's unfortunately common in the DME world for the Medicare fee schedule essentially to be the highest payment amount. But then from a private payer perspective, reimbursement is only a percentage of the Medicare fee schedule. So for a simple math example, say that Medicare pays $100 for a product, a private payer might only pay $70. They're paying 70% of the Medicare fee schedule. So that $30 gap can really make a big deal at the end of the day as far as can a supplier supply that product at $70. That's sometimes a difficult decision to be made, or the answer is sometimes no. And so if there is a specific product or a group of products, to your point with bandages, where the prices are essentially so low that no one is willing to supply it, we do want to hear that. Because again, there's the Medicare fee schedule, but then there's also the payers that negotiate contracted rates. But if we have examples where that lower payment amount is limiting a patient's ability to find a viable supplier, that matters too. So yes, I would say use this form for both types of scenarios.
Great.
Mhm. So let's talk a little bit about the future. So we're going to continue to advocate for the main three topics that we've covered today. So coding, coverage, and payment. From an overall HCPCS coding perspective, those codes are the different numbers or labels that apply to different products. We just got a bunch of data that we're trying to analyze and see, do we have enough HCPCS codes? Do we need to add more? Pamela and I were just having a discussion about some of the wraps. They're missing different spots. We've advocated for that, but we need more data to go back to CMS with. So we're in the process of doing some fun and nerdy stuff with Excel data to try to paint that picture for CMS to help them understand that there is a need for additional HCPCS codes. Nighttime is another one where we're missing quite a few. So we're trying to advocate for additional codes. And then, like we were talking about, the difference between Medicare and private payers. We want to sit down and have conversations with them. It will always be more successful if we can point out specific patient examples or clinician frustrations or supplier frustrations. So hearing your feedback is really important. The other part is letting us know what is or is not working just on a day-to-day basis. We want to hear from the people in the real world. I understand that in my role, I've gotten to work with different companies and different organizations. And so I have a unique position in getting feedback from different places, but the attendees on this webinar are also a huge part of that feedback. So sharing that with us is important, sharing your frustrations so that we can try to advocate for change. One of the other things that I like to call out is that what happens right now is going to shape the future of coverage for compression garments for the next 10 to 20 plus years. So the Lymphedema Treatment Act, it implemented a new benefit category. There was not coverage for this before. It's an act of Congress. So now this is a new spend for Medicare. And they have told us they will have to review the implementation of this new product category. That means that there will be audits. There will be analysis of what claims were submitted, what products were dispensed, and the why behind it all. So I really encourage people to be thoughtful. And I truly believe if you're doing the right thing for the patient, that it's going to be successful. But just a reminder that the things we're doing today will essentially be the foundational documents, the foundational patients and claims that get reviewed and audited to determine what will happen in the future. Because we don't have a policy yet, but the current claims and actions will likely help formulate that in the future. So again, do what's right by the patient, use your clinical judgment, and we should be headed in the right direction.
And Carmen, along those lines, can you also just kind of talk about how important it is that we as therapists and as vendors, DME suppliers, that we are following the standard of care and actually submitting the maximum quantities that are allowed when it's appropriate? Because we could lose that benefit you've pointed out.
Yeah, I think so. Right now, the statutory or the regulatory language, so those quantity limits, the three units for daytime and the 2 units for nighttime, are established in the final rule. It would have to be changed through the rulemaking process again. But if there's things that come out of the data, say there's trends that patients are only getting 1 product and they're only getting 2 products at a time, they're not utilizing that full 3. I can't speak with certainty, but if we're not following some of the anticipated benefits, it's possible that they could be revised. And so we just want to be conscious of that. Again, it all goes into statutory and regulatory language, and I won't pretend to be a total expert on that, but I do want to encourage people to utilize the benefit as intended. And ultimately, again, that's for the patients. It's so that they're not wearing soiled garments and that they have access to clean garments. So do want to encourage that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So we'll do a quick recap. As I mentioned, the coverage began on January 1st, 2024. We are now a year and a half into it. We are getting some data that we plan to analyze and share to really show some of those trends that we're seeing in the first year and a half. Reminder that PDAC product verification is voluntary. We are not operating within an LCD or policy article yet. Anticipate that it could happen in the future, but until then, really relying on clinician judgment, medical necessity documentation, and just doing what's right for the patient. And it all comes to those daily visit notes and what is justified for those patients. And reminder that the other payers, the private payers or Medicaids, they'll have their own policies and processes. It's going to vary by plan type. And again, ultimately, that call to action to share denials or lack of access because of low pricing, share that through the LAG denial reporting form so that we can all continue to partner together. Because it's not just the USMCA. There's a group of dealers that are coming together. There's a lymphedema advocacy group. There are still many people advocating for quality coverage and quality access for these patients. So the attention is there, and we don't want to let up on the focus and intensity for that. So keep sharing your voice and feedback.
Okay, we do have a couple things that have come up in the chat that I know you and I have talked about before and you have an answer for. So hot topic here, because the majority of the people that have joined us today are therapists and clinicians. So the question came up, what is the plan for, is there any plan for therapists to start being able to get reimbursed for measuring and fitting and things like that? And I know you and I have talked about how, unfortunately, the LTA is really only applying to DME suppliers, and to the therapist side of things is a whole other bucket.
Yeah. It is a rightfully passionate topic, and I support the frustration and the challenges of the therapists. I am a speech language pathologist by trade. So I worked in skilled nursing facilities right next to PTs and OTs that were treating the lymphedema patients. I get it. You all already have a full plate for that. What I would point out is that there are different groups that are advocating for different pieces. So from a PT perspective and an OT perspective, I know that AOTA, APTA, your national organizations, they've had engagement with CMS. And so I would really encourage you to keep contacting them. And right now we are operating within the language that has been published by CMS. And the final rule that they published was several hundred pages long. I think about 30 pages were specific to the LTA, but they essentially said within that regulatory language that paying the therapists would differ from every other DME structure that they have in place. So at this time, they were not considering it. Doesn't mean it's off the table in the future, but there would have to be additional discussion. And my understanding is that the clinical organizations would potentially engage in that in the future. So I would encourage you, if it's a topic you're passionate about, to contact APTA, AOTA, or potentially even your state licensure boards as well.
Okay, yeah, great info on that, because I know that's a hot topic here with this group for sure. Okay, and then another question came up about our lymphedema treatment products currently up for the competitive bidding.
Great question. So you've heard me talk about the proposed rule, the final rule. They come out every year. The one that was just released in July specified that they are doing a technical clarification to that lymphedema compression items may be included in competitive bidding. I've been in conversation with Heather Ferguson at LAG as well. We've asked some questions. Our understanding is that it's really just a technicality And it was written within the Lymphedema Treatment Act law that was passed that they would be eligible for competitive bidding. But this is not an announcement of what specific products will be included in the next round. That would be separate. So the proposed rule that was published is essentially a technicality that says they are eligible to be included in competitive bid, but it is not a written in stone that lymphedema compression treatment items will be included. So that is just a technicality for fun regulatory language for now, but we will continue to advocate that they are not included in the future. So again, legal technicality that they're eligible, but not necessarily an announcement that they will be.
Great. That's good news.
Well,
Go ahead, Josh.
Well, what I was going to do is just kind of run through some of the other questions that I know you answered in the chat, just for people that may not have access to the chat. So I just wanted to touch on some of these. One therapist writes that they got a lot of pushback for getting accessories and bandages covered. And I know you talked a little bit more about that, but I just wanted to point out that that's not, you're not alone. A lot of people are having that. For the most part, and please correct me if I'm wrong, for the most part, accessories, as long as they're ordered with a garment, we can get most accessories covered. It's the
Correct.
bandaging that is a larger struggle with that. But I have heard from lots of therapists that that some of their HMEs are having trouble with that accessory code. I can say that from compression care side, we typically can get it done, but it does have to be. It can't be by itself. It has to be with a garment.
Correct.
And so,
Yeah, I
because
can speak a little more to that because there is a distinction between someone posted the question about accessories and bandages. Those are two very different things. So if you take the bandage category by itself, as I addressed in the chat, we as DME providers are not getting reimbursed enough to cover those bandages. And by bandages, we're usually talking about short stretch bandages, gray foam, Comprex, finger bandages, all the things that you're using as part of your treatment protocol. We're not getting paid reimbursed enough. The reimbursables are much lower than it costs us to be able to provide those items to you. So that's why you're seeing a lot of DMEs not provide the bandaging supplies because it results in a loss. Now, as far as accessories, what Joshua was referring to, accessories to a particular garment. Let's say, for instance, you have a custom flat knit knee high and you want to add a VY dart, a silicone border, a flex functional zone, a silk lining. We're not having any trouble as a DME provider getting those accessories covered, the A6593 code. It's a lot of documentation we have to do on our end to explain to Medicare what that is, what we're actually billing. But we're doing that seamlessly, no problems getting covered. There's not a quantity limit. The only issue is you just need to have that in your documentation. So if somebody needs a flex functional zone, it can be as simple as, her previous daytime garments were creasing at the ankle. It could be something simple that just tells us why they need those. Silicone border to help hold the garment up on the calf. Any documentation that lets us know why they would need an accessory. Let's take, for instance, a donning device. Patient had hip replacement last year, has trouble getting to their feet. That's good enough too. So anything you put in the medical record does help that accessory get covered, but the accessories are getting covered without any issue.
excellent, thank you. And then just another thing that came in, asking a question about daytime garments. Can you combine different types of daytime garments? And the answer there is yes. The wraps are considered daytime garments. Obviously the compression socks, whether that be ready to wear or made to measure flat knit, they're still considered daytime garments. So if you wanted to get 2 stockings and 1 wrap, or 2 wraps and 1 stocking, that would count to that total of 3. So I just wanted to make sure we pointed that out. Let's see, we answered that one. BB answered that one. Oh, UHC is a hot topic amongst us all, and it's this question: how about UHC? How do these patients get compression? UHC has been an issue for pretty much every supplier out here, doing what we do. We have, as far as UHC Medicare Advantage, we have a solution, and we should be announcing that solution. We're actually beta testing that solution this month. We should be making an announcement next month of how we are going to go about doing that, and that we can do UHC Medicare Advantage. Please don't all rush out and send us every one of your UHC Medicare Advantage patients tomorrow, but we will be coming out with that communication. And if you do have certain patients that you want to email me directly, you're welcome to email me, and we'll kind of work through it and see if we can help you in the meantime. But we will be having that communication coming out very soon. So, but as far as UHC commercial plans, we're still getting denials on those.
Yes, UHC commercial in most cases is actually denying the new LTA codes. Remember, there's a difference between denying something and not having adequate coverage. It's two different things. But actual denial, where the claim comes back and says, we do not cover this, that's a denial. So this is where you would use that denial reporting form that Carmen put up with the QR code. I would suggest all of you keep that on your phone, on your computer, print it out, have it on your desk for your patient. Patients who have UHC, I would encourage all of them to fill out that denial reporting form that says, hey, nobody will supply my garments, A, due to reimbursement, or B, you're telling me these garments aren't covered, because as Carmen mentioned, commercial insurance policies are not required to follow Medicare guidelines. That is why we're seeing denials with UHC. We're also seeing denials with Aetna commercial as well, saying the codes are not covered.
And the LAG just sent out, I think, a call to action email. If you're on their newsletter, email list, or whichever it is, they sent out a call to action specifically for UHC, because we know there's a lot of feedback and frustration. And so we are targeting them with urgency to have a conversation. So the sooner we have the examples of the UHC denials, the better. So Pamela's right. Just have that QR code, or bookmark the website. If you just search Lymphedema Advocacy Group in Google, it's under resources or insurance resources. That denial reporting form is where we need the UHC examples the most.
Perfect. Yeah, definitely do that. Please. It'll help us all out, and it'll help the patients for sure. Another question came in. Are Medicaid plans also denying the new code?
So the super fun thing about Medicaid is that it's the wild, wild west is what I like to call Medicaid, because each state is independently operated. So each Medicaid plan within the state has their own system, but then you might also have managed Medicaid plans so there might be a state-run program, but then they might also use a commercial payer like a Centene or Anthem to manage those Medicaid plans. So they are a little bit independent in terms of what they do. And the LAG group is doing a really nice job of compiling a list of all the Medicaids and what they are or are not doing. And we are actually going to attend the National Medicaid Director meeting this fall in an effort to have some additional conversations to address those discrepancies. So they are unique in that they should be, I say should loosely, they should be adopting the Medicare things, but it's really on a state by state basis as well. So same concept, we're trying to identify the discrepancies and address those.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate you addressing that too. So let's see, one more looks like it just came in here. We've got
that what Stacy just posted, who she's dealing with, UHC Medicare commercials not have problems covering your claims. That's great. They potentially could have a different contract than the rest of us. I know as Pretty in Pink and Compression Care right now, we're currently in renegotiations with UHC to renegotiate our contract in the hopes that we then can provide those options. But yes, your local DME, I would encourage, or whoever you're using to bill your items, I would definitely go to them and ask them, could they potentially reach out to United Healthcare and initiate a formal request for a contract review or something like that. Because if somebody is successful out there, then we all want to know what the secret sauce is and figure out how we can all adopt it.
Yeah, and for the person that sent that out, please shoot me an email. I'd love to continue discussing that with you. If you've got some way to get it done, I'd be happy to talk to you about it. Joshua@compressioncare.com. So please reach out to me. I'd love to keep these conversations going, because if we can all work together and figure it out, it just helps every single patient that we all work with. So,
Mhm.
but I want to thank everybody who attended this. I definitely appreciate it. Also want to thank Carmen. Thank you so much for being here and doing this for me. And thank you, Pam, for taking time out of your day to be on here as well.
Mhm.
I definitely appreciate that. If any other questions come up, you're welcome to email them to me. I will make sure to get them to Carmen or Pam, or get you an answer one way or the other. Just shoot it over to me and I'll do that. We will have a recording of this meeting and all our past meetings posted on our website for you to review. And we hope to see you again next month for the Spotlight Education meeting for August. Thank you so much. I appreciate you all, and have a great day.
Have a great day.
Okay.